just completed my deploy. It was successful, and I've come now and refreshed my purchase order application in BizTalk Admin Console. And you can see I have two orchestrations now that are not enlisted or not started, because why? One of them is a new orchestration, and the other one I've added a port to it. So if we check here, you can see the word none on my new port. So what I need to do, that's going to be a send port. I need to create a new send port here going to my new dummy directory. So I'll create a static one-way port, and we will call this, what are we going to call it? How about orc demo 1? Null dummy correlation, something like that. Sorry I didn't put a lot of thought into these names. In the real world I would spend a little more time on that. And then here in my copy paste buffer I have the name of the new file I just created, the new directory I created, where we'll store the null correlation. Okay. And that should be XML so that it correlates properly. And then we need to turn on and start that port. Then we're going to go back to our orchestration, go back to my big original orchestration, go to bindings, and then now I will pick my new port called orc01 null dummy correlation, null init inventory request correlation. Okay, my host is still good, so I close that. And now if I try to start that orchestration, it should start, because now there's no dependency between these other two orchestrations. Even though in our mind we think of this being the caller and this being the callee, since we're using direct binding, BizTalk doesn't have any precedence between these two. And now to bind this one, we go to Properties, Binding, and there are no, since everything's direct binding, there is nothing to do here. So we just do BizTalk server apps. Let me just reemphasize that. In our little inventory application, even though we have two ports on the left, because they're direct binding, they're not listed here because they don't have to be tied to send or receive ports, because they go directly to the message box database without any intervening tools. Okay, so now that's set, and then we start it. Okay, we're now ready to take our orchestration out for a spin and test it, except one thing. I didn't restart the host instance. So we restart that, and we're going to run our small file through. Small meaning it's under $1,000. We don't have to do any approvals on it. Okay, the file has been consumed. It's now 2:33. Orchestration going. Second orchestration finished. See, the orchestration inventory check now shows up here. And it looks like we bombed out somewhere there. Since we're in a loop, we should actually see this orchestration check called twice, because we should loop once and call it, and then we should loop again and call it. So we're going to go to the application event log and see what kind of errors we're getting. Looks like our XPath is having a problem. Well, we tested this before, actually. Input string was not in the correct format. Notice here we have a string to number issue. Okay, that's kind of mysterious. So first of all, let's look at this. The shape name is called getPart and quantity. That's this piece of code right here. And again, what makes that very strange is we actually tested this before we ever did our direct binding. So there wasn't any bugs here before. So I pulled up my last trace, and the last line I see that worked was this one, which was number of items equals 2. And I never got into my 1710 logic at all. So I got this trace here. Right, we should have put some traces here as well, and then during the loop I never got to this one. So the application event viewer tells us we're dying here, and I guess we could also check to see if our message actually got sent. So if we go to the correlation dummy directory that we created, there is our file, and you can see we did get the GUID F1577. If we look at our trace, see that's F1577, so we are using our process ID for our GUID, so that's good. I'm looking again at the event log. I keep focusing here on this string to number, which implies to me that the error is in the quantity right here. But again, what kind of bamboozles me is that we actually ran this code a few minutes ago and it actually worked fine. So what changed? So in a case like this, I guess there's two approaches. One is you just kind of do a desk check and sit and think about it for 10 or 15 minutes. But I tend to take a little bit more of a brute force approach. Is I'll add a trace and run it again. So what I'm going to do is take one of our other trace statements like this, and I'm actually going to temporarily just put it right in here. So here I'll call this 1701, and I'm going to display the loop counter and nothing else. Again, this is sort of brute force method, but I find it works usually. And then we could actually display the XPath here. I don't think there's a problem with that, but and then we're going to display the same XPath after this one. And then here let's display the part number. So we can number these in a minute. This will be V part number. And then this final one here will be the quantity. Okay, so now let's number our traces. 1701, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's it. Okay, and I see a plus sign problem here because that's a number, so we have to add the other system convert to string. And let's just build that and see if I have any typos. So after adding all this trace logic, I'm going to redeploy and retest, and I'll pause the video during that time and I'll come back to you. And here's the results of that brute force trace. I get my number of items is 2. I'm in the loop the first time, and even the part number is not being found anymore. So it's not finding here at sign product number, which we know was up here. So again, I'm going to do another sort of brute force test. What's interesting to me is that this XPath is working fine right here. It is message standard PON. And then this XPath here on message standard PON is not working. So to me it looks like my message standard PON somehow got corrupted between these two places. So to prove that it did or did not get corrupted, I'm going to add another trace right here. We'll call this 1709. And what I need to do is one of my full XML document dumps here, which we had at the top actually, like this. So we'll just copy this trace actually. And so right here we're going to look at our whole message. So we're going to say new XML document equals standard PON, and this is like 1709. And I'm just going to put here verify standard PON, I want to make sure my document is still intact at this point. And I'll pause video and test again. And my suspicions were true. Look at this. 1709, my standard PON has totally been replaced by my PO inventory request record. This kind of thing happens occasionally. Very, very strange, okay? So of course my XPath isn't going to work if my XML got corrupted. So it looks like somehow writing to that dummy directory has corrupted my primary message in my program. How did that happen? So right here, first of all, what are we constructing? We're constructing a message inventory request. We load an XML document. Okay. We set the correlation, and we simply have a send statement with a correlation. And then boom, right after that, my message is corrupt. Or the XML document is corrupt. I've seen that happen before too. So even though here we're creating a new XML document, just for fun, let's make an XML document 2 and try this again. Aha, sorry, I was thinking a little bit more while I was off the video. I know what's happening now. It's kind of a very interesting little trick. Right here when we said load XML document, we actually had XML document pointing to another message from before. So way back here when we did our standard trace, XML document is a reference variable, right? And it's pointing to memory to the standard PON. So right here, when I load this little dummy, quote-unquote, dummy message, I'm actually overlaying wherever XML doc is pointing to. And XML doc is actually pointing to some other message. So actually, I'm pretty sure this is the way we can fix it, is we will just copy this right here. And this is a trick actually I remember from the past, but I still forget it. Is anytime you use XML document, you should always instantiate it. Or you should use a separate variable here, XML doc2, XML doc3, so you make sure that you don't, when you load this XML document, you're not really messing up one of your messages that you've already got in memory. So now we're instantiating XML doc is now, we're breaking the pointer. The reference pointer is no longer pointing to my standard PON, and so now it's pointing somewhere else. And then we'll load this message, and then everything should be cool now. So we don't really need this doc2 here after all. And one more time, I'll go test and come back to you.